Hello everyone, Sierra Turner here, and welcome to today's training session. Today we will be discussing Chapter 4 from the Community Network for Youth Development Guide. And of course we want to give a special thank you to HRSA. Without them, this project and this PowerPoint here today for this training would not be available. So again, a huge thank you to HRSA. All right. So the purpose of this training is to define and discuss physical safety, define and discuss emotional safety, define and discuss ACEs, and discuss the importance of equity in safety. So when we think about safety for young people, we must consider both physical and emotional safety. Physical safety occurs when programs keep children safe, when their facilities, materials, and equipment are hazard-free, and all staff use safety practices such as active supervision. Essentially, safety requires intention. Physical safety occurs when we have the freedom to feel secure and take risks that help us grow. So to best support our young people, we really should make sure that we are focusing on young people's healthy development. With that being said, young people must feel secure that adults will protect them from harm, know that they are protected by a fair set of consistently applied rules, and feel secure that they will be valued and accepted by the group. Okay, so with all of that, why is safety important? Well, it's important because young people must experience a sense of personal and emotional safety if they are to learn important life skills and competencies that they will need in adulthood. It is critical to their development. There's a good amount of neurological evidence that if students do not feel safe, they will not learn. Fear causes stress, and psychologically speaking, stressed brains are not able to form the necessary neural connections. The amygdala, the part of the brain that controls the fight or flight, actually goes into overdrive when we're stressed, and that gets in the way of certain parts of the brain that can store information and help us learn. All right, so we know that physical safety occurs when programs keep children safe. We can ensure physical safety by using equipment that is hazard-free and developmentally appropriate, having facilitators use any and all safety practices, and have them provide active supervision. But what about emotional safety? How can we as facilitators work with young people to gain that? Emotional safety enables us the freedom to collaborate, dream, be wildly creative, share bold ideas, feel increased compassion, and express ourselves freely with one another. So here are some things facilitators can do to ensure emotional safety. Have non-negotiables. Along with the classroom rules and procedures, students must know non-negotiables right out the gate. My biggest non-negotiable? Name calling. This should result in an immediate consequence, whether that's a call to the dean, a sit-out of the activity, or removal from the classroom for that day. Tackling name calling head on is really important, or the young people won't feel safe to be themselves, let alone learn. Also, address grudges early on. If tension is building between a couple of students, create time and space for them to talk it out while you mediate. Model vulnerability. They will appreciate this. If we are asking young people to write and talk about the times that they felt scared, alone, confused, etc., we need to be willing to do the same. Give young people a chance to solve a problem on their own. It's so much better when the ideas and solutions come from the student. This is a chance for us to ask rather than to tell. What might be some things you can do to help complete your homework on time? How about I write them down and you lead the way by telling me? That's a great way to have youth-led activities, which we love because that is in continuity with our youth development approach. Offer options. If we start off with an assignment, you will have 3 choices. Young people might even get excited and are often much more willing to participate when they know there are choices. It sends a message to them that we respect their decisions. Also, laugh with your students. This message sends, learning doesn't have to be always so serious, and nor do we as facilitators. Sometimes when tensions are high, like during a test or when crazy things are happening outside in the world or the campus, we need to laugh together. It's okay to laugh with your students. We also want to remain calm at all times. Once a teacher or facilitator loses it with a class or a student, it takes a really long time to rebuild that feeling of safety and trust within those four walls. So step outside the door, take a few breaths, let your co-facilitator step in, and trust me, it's worth it. Taking that time to cool off will only benefit the relationship building with your young people because you're showing them that sometimes you need to take care of yourself before you can then give to others. Take every opportunity to model kindness because your young people will follow. And circulate. Mingling lets you monitor their work, yes, but also gives you a close view of any tensions or negative energy that might be brewing between groups or students. Also, circulating gives you great opportunities to overhear a student sharing an idea or a question that you could really use to the whole class. All right. So what are ACEs? Have you all ever heard of this term before? ACEs, or also known as adverse childhood experiences, are traumatic events occurring before the age of 18. ACEs include all types of abuse and neglect, as well as parental mental illness, substance use, divorce, incarceration, and domestic violence. A landmark study in the 1990s found a significant relationship between the number of ACEs a person experienced and a variety of negative outcomes in adulthood, including poor physical and mental health, substance use, and risky behaviors. The more ACEs experienced, the greater the risk for these outcomes. By definition, children in the welfare system have suffered at least one ACE. Recent studies have shown that in comparison to the general population, these children are far more likely to experience at least 4 ACEs. So, how can this information help our young people? Research about the lifelong impact of ACEs underscores the urgency of prevention activities to protect children from these and other early traumas, and provides us as facilitators guidance as to how to promote emotional safety with young people. When young people do experience trauma, understanding the impact of ACEs can lead to more trauma-informed interventions that help mitigate negative outcomes. Fortunately, many communities are now exploring how a focus on reducing ACEs can actually help prevent childhood maltreatment, produce healthier outcomes for children and families, and save costs down the road. All that is to say, it's important to recognize that some young people in our programs have experienced ACEs, and that you will be talking about how to combine ACEs with the youth development approach later, so something to be mindful of. So, do you remember how in session 2 we discussed youth supports and their importance? Well, as a reminder, safety is one of those 5 essential youth supports for positive youth development. To put things into context, the other 4 youth supports include relationships, youth participation, community involvement, and skill building. I just put this slide here so you could see where we are now and where we are going. Our next sessions to come will cover the rest of the youth supports in detail. So we've already mentioned the benefit of safety in terms of learning, but there are actually many other benefits of having safety. Safety also promotes trust. When all the young people in the program feel safe, they are more likely to tell adults what they are really thinking and feeling, and that can help you help them. As you gain a deeper understanding of their opinions and wants, you can better meet a young person's needs. Promoting a sense of safety and acceptance serves to reduce acting out behaviors and underlying anxiety. Fight is one of those options in the fight or flight mode, and many of the behaviors that are thought of being as willfully defiant have their roots in a lack of safety. So, how do we create safety? Low youth to staff ratio ensures that all young people receive adequate supervision and support. When you walk into a new space, you can immediately get a sense of how inclusive and accessible it is. The images of the wall represent the participants' racial and ethnic diversity and present diverse role models, not only in terms of race and ethnicity, but also in terms of family structure, gender, sexual orientation, and religious backgrounds. You may also see inclusive values represented on the walls with statements such as, "Mistakes are okay," or "Everyone is welcome here." Consistency is also important, especially as it relates to what is formally called behavior regulation or managing young people's behaviors. There needs to be a clear and high expectations for how young people and staff behave with respect towards one another. The consequences have to be fair and the consequences need to be consistent. It can be helpful to have a group decide on the behavioral expectation excuse me. It can be helpful to have the group decide on the behavioral expectations and consequences together at the beginning of the program to write those rules down and post them visibly on the wall. It's also important to revisit those rules. Sometimes people call those rules group respects. There are always two or more perspectives on what happened. Somehow that has to be taken into account when deciding consequences so that all the young people in the room feel like they've been heard. Finally, knowing and involving your community is essential. They will know how dangerous it is getting to and from your program and the best way to minimize that danger. Remember, throughout this process, your community can always be a resource. All right, so how do we create emotional safety? In addition to physical safety, we now know that young people need emotional safety. Several attributes of programs are key for that. First, continuity and consistency of care is important. Young people need to know that the program is something stable that they can count on, most especially the continuity of the staff they care about. Of course, if something isn't working, change it. What matters is the continuity of a safe and supportive environment. Emotional safety for both staff and youth is fostered by ongoing improvement processes. They are beyond the scope of today, and the main point is that you have to keep working at it. Just like physical safety, knowing and involving your community is also important for emotional safety. Community members will be able to tell you about cultural backgrounds for youth. For example, immigrant and refugee youth from some countries will not look you in the eye out of respect. In mainstream U.S. culture, that can be interpreted as a sign of disrespect. Demanding to be looked in the eye can create fear for the young person. Finally, it's important to provide safety at all levels of the organization. If the adults do not feel safe, how can they make the young people feel safe? Now, let's pause here. Think of a time where you felt emotionally safe. What did that feel like for you? Where were you? Who were you with? What other items were surrounding you? Thanks for reflecting. All right, so equity and safety. When it comes to equity, what is its relation to safety? Is there even a connection? Absolutely. If one is not treated equitably and not included, one naturally feels less safe. These are the kinds of biases that can creep into programs and can make students feel unsafe. Language that is dehumanizing or denies the existence of a group can be harmful. Stereotyping is also harmful in regards to stereotyping members of a group in one role or another way, such as boys don't like to do a particular thing, or girls always do this. Invisibility and exclusion can also be very damaging. It means not being seen for who you are. It happens when there are not other people like you in the setting, and when people treat you with stereotypes and excluding language, that can hurt. It can happen very easily when youth have limited language skills, or their cultural skills are not yet developed, and do not match the mainstream. Imbalance and selectivity. These are also things to consider, as well as fragmentation and isolation. All right, so after we just finished some aspects to consider in regards to equity and safety, I'd like us all to start to reflect on ourselves, right, as facilitators. In our programs, stress can play a negative role when trying to establish a sense of safety for adults and for young people. Creating a safe environment for our young people starts with us as facilitators. Now consider these questions about personal stress. What stresses you? How stressed are you? Why does it matter that there is stress? How does stress impact you? And how do you best relieve stress? These are all really great questions to consider. Now, also, there are some questions to consider for our youth. In particular, we want to make sure our youth feel safe at all levels of the organization. So to do that, we need to think about our youth and how all levels of our organization can consider our youth. What stresses our youth out? How stressed are our youth? Why does it matter? And how might the youth best relieve stress? In closing, it's important to remember that physical and emotional health are highly intercorrelated, as depicted here in this figure. We can see that physical safety is associated with emotional safety. Emotional safety is associated with physical safety, and they certainly have an impact on each other. If you have physical safety that is unstable, it is very likely that your emotional safety might be unstable as well, and vice versa. Thank you for joining Session 4. I'll check you out on Session 5. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for joining.